Hello! Welcome to Why Not Both, the podcast all about how our multiple passions and interests shape our identity and our lives. My name is Pam Schaefer, and I am a musician and therapist in Los Angeles, and I also happen to be your host. This podcast is produced by Laura Studeris, and for this season, we've partnered up with Under the Radar magazine. If you like what you hear, you can hang out with us on social media. We are on Twitter and Instagram at WNB the podcast. And if you really, really like what you hear, please support us on Patreon. We are under Why Not Both podcast. When you join our Patreon, you get a whole bunch of really cool behind the scenes stuff and you get to chat with us. And that's pretty awesome. Thank you so much for your support, and I hope you enjoy our interviews. This week, we were thrilled to get to spend some quality time with the talented and magical Yola. I hope that you enjoy our interview. Welcome to Why Not Both.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming. I was listening to your album this morning. It's like the perfect journey. Like, I like that it's like, I love narrative albums, and people don't make narrative albums anymore, really. Well, they do. But
it's the whole concept album that actually starts somewhere and finishes somewhere seems to be quite a rarity. And it's not quite a concept album, but it's close. And yeah, I like that. I like telling stories. You know, it's a big thing.
Yes. I'm a huge reader. And so I enjoy the same in my musical media as I enjoy in books. I'm like, oh, I get to follow this character. And then I save the last pages for last so that they don't leave me.
That's it. I'm a big sci-fi head. Grew up in a lot of sci-fi books, and so yeah, I've always been into you know, kind of that kind of genre of book and movie and television and a bit of fantasy and things like that. And so I've always like relished the story, the idea of movement, of like arriving somewhere, you know. It's always really fun, always really great thing to, and I think like musically, that's why I like being across some genres. It allows me to move and like allows me to tell a story sonically from one space to another and how they're connected, because I suppose that's stories, isn't it? It's like, how did this thing lead to that thing? Yeah. Like, I like to do that both sonically as well as like, you know, narratively.
Oh, I love that idea. Like, almost if, you know, imagining like the hero's journey, kind of each step of the way has a different kind of like sonic landscape.
Well, exactly, you know, because as we like learn things or grow or just go through life, we're not going into kind of tessellated identical spaces and so like that's what I like to do sonically. I like to talk about all the stuff that we've experienced musically in the interim and how they speak to each other, how they've influenced each other, and like, yeah. And so the record really is about connections between concepts or between spaces or between states of mind and states of being, I suppose. Being a little bit of a doormat, and then kind of how I transitioned to not being that. You know, it's kind of an important move. Yeah. And yes. So yeah, because everything, you know, it's the whole everything's connected paradigm, the great oneness. And so yeah, and I think musically I believe in the great oneness. I think everything's connected, and this idea, we just get really obsessed with this idea of like completely standalone like environments for music. Like, this was just these people in this mountain village doing this, and they never saw any other human ever. and that's how this song came about, or this kind of music came about. Like, you know, that's bullshit, and that humans see humans all the time. like all the time, even at that time when you're like the kind of periods of history that people are so desperately trying to not publicize, like anything before 1500 in the West. Affectionately known as the Dark Ages, when it's just black and brown history, they don't want to talk about it. Like,
yep.
It's all of that kind of crap. I'm like, everything's connected. Everyone's traveling to see other humans. They never stopped. They literally never stopped. And yeah, everything's connected all the time. We all are all the time. Everything is all the time.
I love what you just brought up also about, in a way, kind of like the, how do I put it? It's like the unsung stories, but only unsung in the mainstream narrative. Like,
yeah,
those stories are there. They're just the stories that are sometimes covered over or not.
well, it's not convenient for white supremacy, is it?
I was gonna say they just don't
not great.
fit in.
No, you're gonna go and like steal a bunch of stuff. You're not gonna go here are the people I stole it from and how well they were doing with it all. You're gonna go, they didn't even know they had it. It wasn't even really stealing.
Oh my
That's
God.
the narrative that you're gonna tell. You're not gonna be like, wait a minute. If I wasn't stealing gold, for example, that would mean, in theory, that they had no idea they had gold, which would mean all crowns that were gold never existed before the 1500s or 1600s.
Right. They were just.
But we know that's not true. And we also know that only black and brown people had gold.
Right. Right.
And so then someone was selling it. Someone was excavating it and selling it.
Right.
And smelt and turning into things.
Yeah.
And it's somewhat inconvenient a thought, isn't it? When it's like, so if they were selling this stuff, then they were trading, and that was being shipped, and they knew to ship. They knew the price and the value of it, and people were buying it, and only rich people had it. So it wasn't like, oh, they didn't know, they just gave it to any Tom, Dick, and Harry. Only rich people. And so it's like, right, so they were fully aware of the trading environment. Oh, well, then that really changes like our preconceived notion of some continents. And so, yeah, like, I feel like this like narrative of how everything's really super divided is not just a divide and conquer on a kind of political, social level. It's on an artistic level. It's for the white supremacist mind to claim more ownership over contemporary music. Yeah. And not lay it all at the feet of African Americans and essentially, I suppose, Africans. And so that's where we are. And this is the fight that we wage, one that gives credit where it truly is due.
I am nodding vigorously. I realized you can't see me because the camera's off. So I was like, I will add like a text-based adventure cue of like, Pam is nodding vigorously in agreement to what you have said.
Oh, yeah, that's the life I live in. So I have to, I like all of my ability to kind of reconnect everything is to connect it back to the source. That's really what it is. And I love all things that do that.
I love that. And I love like everything, by the way, everything you just said, I wish that I could unpack like every sentence and then this podcast would be like 17 hours long. I was like, strap in.
It's fine. We can move on, but there's a lot there. Like,
well, I was thinking about what you said about like how you started talking about like the stories of sci-fi that informed you, which are in some ways like, I'm so curious which ones informed you, because so much of sci-fi is future facing. However, I find that the more sci-fi I read, the more it's actually like mythos and source facing. And so I was like, that is what like lit up my brain right there. And also, like you said about, you know, that it's inconvenient to the narrative of white supremacy to give anybody other than a white person agency or to have any acknowledgement of the culture and structures that were in place that were like, well, that doesn't fit the narrative. And like, it's very strange. I'm a basically
have a fly in their face.
Yeah,
they can't exist in the modern narrative,
right?
Like, even with Afrobeat, even with what's coming out there now, it's like people still struggle with the idea of the great advancements from the continent. Even to the point that they'll appropriate Egyptian advancement, because at least that's something that has been put into the public consciousness, but not with the hue of people who were behind it. Right. Wait a minute. So did Egyptians marry? So like, what did they look like before? Like were Arabs always there? No.
No. Just no.
No, actually, no. Eventually, obviously, lots of marrying, of course. You know, African and Asian continents kind of like had it sewn up when it comes to money. They had all the stuff, like all of the stuff. And so, yeah, you marry for peace. But there's loads of marrying to, you know, Kushite families, Nubian families. That's all mid and sub-Sahara and the dark as hell. It's not something the narrative tries to make. Like the number of movies have just been like, or represented Egyptians at the most at very pale Arabs is ridiculous.
I always found that so strange. Like growing up, I described myself as off-brand white because I'm like a Jewish girl from the valley. So I'm like, it's like I'm like I'm like the Miracle Whip instead of mayonnaise. It's like that liminal space where you're like, I'm not that, but I'm not that. I'm well, I guess I'm just here.
Yeah, things that aren't always straightforward, but that's a narrative that's never been straightforward. It's like, oh, we're doing everything to kind of disenfranchise it from Africa because it's responsible for so much that we can't handle that they were dark.
I remember in Hebrew school, like learning about like Egyptian culture, and the Egyptians weren't Black. And I remember bringing that up because I was just like, because I had just taken geography class. I was that kid in class. I was just like, but doesn't that, it's right by, like, I was just like, it's like looking at the illustrations in the book. And I was just like, this is weird. These don't look like my friends that are from there. Like, I was like, what's happening?
Why are you doing this to me? This feels wrong.
This is confusing.
Show me on the door where they freaking programmed you.
Exactly. There were these holes that I remember questioning. And did you have that experience? I'm not sure if you had that experience as a kid where it's like you would hear what the dominant narrative is or see the dominant narrative, and you wouldn't have the or at least I didn't when I was a kid.
No, I didn't have the vocabulary. Like I think like they got me on a number of levels because I was raised by my Bajan mum. The English are over there too, so they programmed in Barbados before she even came to England, just so when she landed there, she didn't give her offspring any African ideas. But like, that's like the Brits are better than Americans at hiding and covering up and mentally programming their Black people.
Wow.
That's just what it is, mate.
That's fascinating. The closest person to me that's British is a former partner of mine, and he's white, and he was explaining even like the history that he learned, and it just stops. Like his history lessons stop. And I was like, what do you mean they stop? Like they just, and there's so much that like, and I think there's obviously flaws with the American system, like as seen by us pushing back on teaching critical race theory. But yeah, I was like, not going to ignore the flaws there. But I found
we're not even starting that, mate.
Yeah, I was like, your history lessons just cease. Like at a certain point, it's like that's all of history. Like what? Like, can you?
They won't touch loads of bits because it's not convenient.
Yeah, like what kind of programming? Because that gives all new light to like I said, I was listening to your album. That gives all new light to that, to kind of undo those narratives within you, because you do soak in the things that are around you.
You do. Like it's so much. It's patriarchal and it's anti-Black, and the programming is sophisticated and it's subtle, and it involves myriad cover-ups to keep the idea of the British underdog fighting with tenacity to, you know, be excellent and to disproportionately affect culture in the world positively. You know, that's really the PR campaign, and we mostly believe it. But, you know, like, I don't know whether you can invade a 90 plus percentile of the planet and have the 89th percentile believe that you're still cool if you're not good at that. You know? A number of times I watch the American news, I'm like, haven't you guys heard of a bloody cover-up?
Americans,
you know that Prince Andrew's still freaking being tried for being like all kinds of things.
Oh, yeah.
How much are you hearing of that right now?
Like, we are the most egocentric culture that I've encountered, I must say.
But you're also not subtle. You can't
No.
cover shit up with coffee. We're covering up shit left, right, back, and center here. We're no better than you. You just can't see it. We're way better at this.
That was something that did come up in my former partnership, that though I don't consider myself, like, as an American and as a Jewish American, I'm the quiet one in my family, which is a stunning revelation. But I never considered how direct I was until the very first time when he and I met. Like, we're still good friends, but it's like when he and I met, I'd asked him if he was comfortable sitting on a beanbag chair with me because it was the only spot at my friend's house to watch a movie. And he thought I was making fun of him. I thought I was being polite, asking, like, are you comfortable if I sit here? And he's like, are you comfortable if you sit here? And I was like, well, are you comfortable if I sit here? And he's like, well, are you? And I was just like, I don't understand what is happening right now. I was like, I'm so confused. I'm trying to be nice to this person. And he thought I was mocking him. And it's because of that extraordinary directness and lack of subtlety. Versus British culture.
It's like what we would actually do is just be really awkward about it and then go, oh, I should probably not ask. And then I don't know what, I probably shouldn't sit there. And then awkwardly or just stand like some weird lamppost.
Just stand like a flamingo.
Yeah, just like be like utterly weird instead of just ask for the thing and check. And you know, it's ridiculous. It's a big part of, we don't talk about anything. So take that and extrapolate the trend to how effectively you think we talk about racism.
No.
No.
It's the awkward flamingo in every room.
Oh. The awkward flamingo in every room. Nailed it. Oh, it's mind-blowing. Just trying to get people to, I'm like I remember when I moved to Nashville and people was like, oh, it's quite conservative there. I'm like, I've had like 15 more conversations profoundly about like the nuance of like Black femininity in art and blah, blah, than I have in 30 years of living in the UK. Like, and so if this is the conservative people, you want to come to the UK and see how we do.
Right.
You'll see exactly what's popping. It's interesting. Like it helps percolate the status quo by not really addressing anything because it seems way too direct.
That's fascinating because even in like the conservative areas of America, people will be direct about it. Like that is one thing that it, for lack of a better way of saying it, it's easy to know where you're in danger because people are very vocal about their opinions. Like I do find that, like I said, I'm not religious, but like you can't un-Jewish yourself. Like once you're born Jewish, you can't opt out. I can't unsubscribe. And so it's like
unsubscribe.
I can't be like, sorry, the trial period is over. Like and so there are places where it's like, you know, like I said, off-brand white, where sometimes I don't know, like, are people anti-Semitic or not? But people are generally pretty vocal. Like, and if people are anti-Black, you know it. It's not like there's ambiguity. And so
no, this is not the place for ambiguity. And so the upside of that is that you're like, oh, you're mental. Cool, I'm going over there. Like,
exactly.
You know?
You're like, I'll just not go there.
And yeah, you know, granted, like there are mental people that could just willfully kill you. That's some of this is the lottery of America. There are the worst things on planet Earth. There are the best things on planet Earth, all in one soup. And all you have to do is survive. And then you might get some of those really cool things. And so
it's very high stakes. This kind of
it's high stakes.
Place.
it's high stakes, but the trick is that there's a facility, regardless of whether you are, like psychologically, hope isn't something that is counter the culture.
I was so curious.
It is here. Hope is counterculture. You're a rebel if you have hope here. The fun. It's like, oh, America, you might die in it. You might get killed in America, but in the UK, you might kill yourself. You're your own biggest danger here. It's so like, that's one thing that I was like, really blew my mind. I was like, wow, like that's the big distinctive factor. It's that, it is a full-on gauntlet. You might die, but at least you have hope whilst you're living. And then if you get taken out, I suppose that is what it is. Like, try to not die. Sometimes you don't have a choice. You know, especially while black, the number of random things you can do while black, and they go, it's threatening. You're like, oh, really? I'm on the loo.
My God. It's horrible. And I worry for my friends, because then I'm like, okay, well, what can I do? Like, I'm barely 5 feet tall. What am I going to do? And so all I do is I'm like, please use my paleness as a shield. And like, I mean, it does sometimes work.
You know what you can do though?
Tell me.
There's one really thing. And every white lady listening, if you haven't figured it out already, because I've called the white ladies out, it works. It stops all rooms, everyone, trains stop, airplanes fall out of the sky. White lady tears. You know it.
Yes.
Just stop crying. Weaponize them. Hold all of your black friends and brown friends close and go, I love them, sir. Ah! And then just break down in tears, and like cars will crash because they're looking and not looking where they're going. Like shit stops for like lady tears. They don't stop for black lady tears, but shit stops for white lady tears. So all you lady allies, the second you see something crazy, just start crying. Cry hard. Really, like just white lady as hard as you can, and it will work.
I'm gonna channel
out of the white lady that's crying. If you manage to do it, then you can do it in other places. Weaponize that white lady.
I just made tiny plotting hands. I was just like, so I took acting lessons as a kid, and I will channel my inner most upset Goyishka lady. That is like, now I know, because I'm like, what can I possibly do? And like I said, I tend to like all flit in and be my little like pixie like pale self, just kind of like distracting. And now I'm like, okay, now I know crying is the way, because it's the way. Being a small pale lady, when people are crying, it triggers some sort of like weird latent Victorian urge to like take care of you. It does.
It's actually, you're actually weaponizing another kind of bigotry.
Yeah.
Hatred.
Yeah.
So it's like you're just going to take one bit of bigotry and fight it with another bit of bigotry, which
I'm okay with that.
Have the same power.
I was like, if that's my like She-Ra sort of power to like help deflect from you, I'm like, I will do it.
Hey, I've got English accent privilege, which at least buys me 5 minutes for them to go, do I kill this one? Like, and I'm like, you're so confused. I'm gone. You know?
You're like, everything I say is like bonus 50 points intelligent because of my accent.
Basically. And confusing, because they thought it was just Idris Elba and Naomi Campbell. And like, and so when they realized, oh, there's another one. Oh, what does it mean? Is she ours? Like, does the queen appear if we touch? I don't know. I'm confused. And that moment of confusion is when you scarp her out of the field of, you know, the shot of a bullet. And
that's the best self-defense. That's actually what I learned in self-defense class, was confuse your enemy, because in that moment of confusion, you can escape.
I almost got freaking mugged once, and I've got a number of times in London, but like once I just utterly confused them, and they're like, what? I went, boogity. Like, what's happening? I'm like, I know, right? It's so confusing. It's totally fine. But yeah, if they just don't, you're so much more high maintenance when you're an uncalculated threat. It's like, oh, is this person crazy? Is this person actually going to try and like consume me whole live?
Yes.
Like, if they don't know what you're capable of, it's uncomfortable. And so, but like not having a clue as to like where you are on the pecking order because of your accent, it just buys you enough time to live. It also buys you enough time to like circumnavigate people's cognitive bias enough to give you to actually listen to what you just said. They go, oh God, and they'll try to go, oh, hi girl, you know it, turn up. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't know what you're doing, but I haven't lived here long enough to learn whatever it is saying, but I'll live it soon, and then I'll be like fully versed on whatever trope this is. But and so yeah, they don't even have a trope to go to. It's like utterly disabling.
No.
And like people have like a beef, like, oh, you know, Black English people are getting all the jobs, blah blah. I'm like, no, we're just getting the opportunity to circumnavigate white people's bias long enough to get in. That's really what it is. Ain't nothing else.
Well,
Like,
the linguistic bias that we have in the States, which is so weird that, like, well, not weird, it follows, you know, patriarchal white supremacy, that basically like our mainstream culture will then cherry pick like phrases from not white people language, basically, and then be like,
yeah.
these words are cool now. But then unless you as you pointed out, have a British accent, we're like, those words that you're saying, not cool. Like, those are not cool. We deem those lower than. But these ones that we've cherry picked, we're going to use these in memes, and like, it's going to be great.
Yeah.
Like,
and then they'll do a special little talk to you, thinking you get it right, and I'll be like, well, I think so, but I don't actually. This isn't my voice, so I can't reply to you in kind. But I totally understand what you're saying, because popular culture is a thing. But like,
oh
I can't
God.
do the voice that you're doing. I can't do.
Right.
So like, or like I could practice to do, but it's going to take me a little while.
Well, and that's so strange. I just thought about that, like moving to the States, and especially, I don't know if you been here during like the fun and excitement of the last 2 years.
Yeah, I was here literally 2 years. Yeah.
Oh my God. I'm like, during this period, especially when everyone's identity has been shuffled about, because for a while we just weren't being perceived. I found that to be the most interesting point of this, is like not being perceived and thus being able to just be oneself, and then stepping back into perception, and then people being like, oh, is this your identity? How about this one? Can you try this one on? Like, was it this one? I was like, wow, that must be disorienting and strange.
Well, I think that's it's an interesting thing, this idea of being like a singer-songwriter, now actor. Like, I was straddling, if you will, some identities. I was learning to be an actor and learning about how to bring, I suppose, my musicality into, you know, this whole sense of portraying an icon in a way that's really important to do. And one of those like moments where someone's like trying to like guide your I suppose image and your kind of sense of who you are was like very much in like my first cycle. It was all about like not really knowing anyone in America and having to kind of take what I was given and make good on what I was given, more than necessarily have this great sense of agency and this great sense of being able to I suppose reconnect with the part of myself, the 4-year-old self that knew that she wanted to do exactly this, and really honor that. You know, I kind of had to work with people who I didn't have like we weren't born on the same continent, we are the same generation, same ethnicity, same gender. Like, we barely even spoke the same English because of the differences between American and English.
Yeah.
You know? And so, yeah, like, it was weird. The pandemic actually reversed it for me, because everyone became freaking hypersensitive about how like, it felt like white fragility was on a high just before George Floyd, and then had to hit the floor real quick because there were so many things going, I'm not going to help you.
And my God.
Like, you know, things that were like, also, here's loads of materials so you don't have to ask me, or put out one of those really weird fake feeler messages to the one Black person that you basically never talk to, just to feel like you've got like one Black friend ever. And not because you're really going to do anything like at all, just because you just want to be absolved for like 5 minutes. And so like, I felt like it really reversed it for me, because everyone's like, shit, no, we can't just like not do a thing. This is the bit that there's everyone saying that anti-racism is active, so get off your bloody ass and do something. And so like the big heel turn was really helpful, and everything that my team had been pushing for was finally just like, oh sure, of course.
Oh my
like, wow, this is freaking amazing. And like basically all the Black people in Nashville were all talking to each other, FYI. You know when they say, oh, do you all know each other? We didn't, but we do now. And and we were all nattering away like, so did like are you getting all the things that you didn't get literally 5 minutes ago? Yeah, it's brilliant. It was bloody great. And so like, yeah, it felt like I was like finally able to step into the final like little incarnations of my being, little things I constructed for myself that I wasn't really able to actualize before. Wow. You know, it was a real gift, like people not being able to kind of white lady tears their way out of like their own bias. You talk to me about my bias, I'm gonna like the number of times I've had white women cry at me because you called them out on something that was clearly not great. It's like, you could ask, I could confidently say you could call up any Black lady now and says, has a white woman tried to white lady tears out of the like doing something slightly racist? And they'd be like, 100% yes. Oh, so much. Like really, I can't think of a Black lady friend that I have that won't reply like that. And so that just evaporated. All the kind of the bro side of that situation was like, it was just it became easier. It certainly didn't fix, and there's a whole lot of performative, but like, you know, and people that really don't get that, like, to really lift up, it can't be about you. So like, you can't go, wow, yeah, I got all of these Black people to serve me as lifters of my sedan share. Whoop, whoop, whoop. Like, it's not the same. I'm sorry. Like, I mean, really uplift, like to your level. I know it's uncomfortable. No one likes competition, but like, least of all when it's Black and excellent, but still do it. And so, yeah, like, it's funny, this idea of identity, and it just kept on just revolving all the time through my life, through the lockdown, because then I had to go and act. And so I get like shipped out to, Australia. I get a fly out, shall I say, and with almost no one on the bloody plane, obviously.
Right.
And the government goes, oh, it's fine for you to come in and like finish this movie, but they do it in small chunks, so we're not all together obviously at the same time. And yeah, like, and then the real stage of becoming as an actor, like, is something that, like, it felt like everything that I had to kind of navigate played into my understanding of Sister Rosetta Tharpe and how to portray her. Like, if as a woman of color you've had to navigate all of this, imagine being a queer woman of color in Memphis in the 50s with your out and out girlfriend playing piano with you and just being like just utterly unapologetic in your portrayal of like your life and your brilliance in yourself, and how you get to that. I'm like, there's definitely a biopic of her waiting to happen, but like, just like what it takes. And you know, and I in the same way as like, I know that I didn't come to my sense of like self-worth in a linear, straightforward fashion. Like, you know, you can only imagine like how much programming she had to overcome to love herself and to like turn that into the kind of revolutionary art that became rock and roll, you know? Like, it just, like, nothing's lost in this journey, nothing. And like, that's what I really, if there's one thing that I learned about the pandemic, is that like nothing's lost. Like, you just like, you weaponize every skill, every random thing you've ever done turns into something that's useful. And when the kind of, you know, pants get freaking pulled down of society, then
Mhm.
you turn to all of those things that prepared you to survive, to pivot, or to do something that makes you feel full again.
Well, in that description of your, in a way, like your learning was an unlearning. And then as you spoke to, like, I'm sure I have been that white lady. I know for sure I've been that white lady that has wanted to react defensively because it's hard being wrong and it's hard learning, like, wow, you did something that kind of made you low-key an asshole. And then you're like, oh, I can either double down on being wrong or I can just accept that and learn something different. And
Thing right now,
yeah,
you are within under a handful of white women who have admitted to doing that. FYI.
I'm like, hooray! I get an A at being an asshole by accident.
and thing though as well.
Oh my god!
Because the first rule of freaking AA is admit you've got a problem, right?
Exactly.
You can't just be fixed and just never broach the moment that when you had a massive issue. Like you have to go, oh, there was an issue and I'm gonna deal with it. And here is what it is, and I own it. And it wasn't great, but I'm fighting it every day. I'm programming myself every day. And we have to, because the programming goes to everybody. It isn't like just a little special little psychic link like bloody well Voldemort or something. Like it goes to everybody. So black people get it, brown people get it, everyone bloody gets it. Like, and it's just a matter of how well you deprogram yourself, you know.
Well, and it takes work. It's good work to do, and it's good to acknowledge. I wish that, like, at some point I might write like a little social script of like how to gracefully be wrong about something. Because at some point all of us are.
Yeah. I really prided myself on going, do you know what? I'm willing to be wrong. Like, that's totally within my remit. And if I am, that was not it. I'm fucking sorry. Like,
exactly.
Like, I'm ready. Like, and I know it started out, my willingness to say sorry extremely quickly kind of started out as a kind of a scar. It was like that, you know, my family weren't the forgiving kind. They weren't really the empathetic kind. So I always had to be the first one to say sorry. And so it didn't come from a healthy place, but it was still useful in that I knew how to say sorry. I'd be like, oh no, that was me. Sorry. No, actually sorry. Feeling real, palpable guilt. Sorry.
Yep. Yep.
You know, it sucks. I kind of sucked. Like, I used to be like way sexist before. I used to hang out with people that were kind of sexist, but it was also normal, like in the environment that I was in, because most people were like that. They would like, there were so many people that would program women to not think that they could play instruments, for example. And so loads of people, even when they were starting, like they were mentally predisposed to do less well because they weren't even pushing like to get kind of sports science about it. They were thinking counter their muscle movement, which if you've ever watched an athlete, you'll know that they visualize in the direction of their muscle movement.
Yes. Oh my God. I love
it's
brought
like,
that up.
Yeah, it's like anti-sports psychology, making people less capable of doing what they need to do by telling them they're going to be less capable. And so it was like the kind of like a really universal mindfuck that kind of occurred in like Bristol when I was growing up. It was ridiculous. And so there were many situations in which like I was programmed to like call a guy to do this thing instead of a woman or whatever, to not be able to believe or see it because I'd been successfully programmed. So there's so much undoing to be done. And like part of the undoing is realizing exactly how wrong you were, how much of a freaking douche you were. And it's like nice to just not be a douche.
That's the whole thing is in the end, like my whole goal, I was just like, don't embroider this on a pillow. I was like, my whole goal is just to be like less douchey. I was like, and it's like, that's what you said about, especially like seeing other engineers or producers or even people who are playing instruments, like I'm like, spoiler alert, I'm a musician as well. And for a long time, despite taking electronic music classes, composition, music theory, all these things, playing the piano since I was 5, like, did I think for a long time that I could produce things? No. And it was because I was generally instructed to call upon my male peers, and I wasn't presented with non-male engineers or producers. And when I was, it was like, here's the one. That's it. You get like Delia Derbyshire. That's it. That's the one.
That's it. There's always an exception.
Yeah.
And they'll totally allow the exception, but it's the same thing as when there's only, it's like the token black person.
Yes.
So like, it's just, oh, there's an exception. And if you're extremely and they never tell someone else, you could be the next one.
No.
In exceptionalism, there's no like, oh, but you could be the next one, so go. It's always like, there's only one, it's her. And like, said yes. And when she does die even, it's probably not going to be you. Like,
Oh yeah, mine was Barbara Streisand. Like literally everyone's just like, has anyone ever told you that like you're like Barbara Streisand, or like, have you like checked out Barbara Streisand? And I was just like, why are you pointing to literally the one very identifiably like Ashkenazi Jewish woman? Like, I don't even look like Barbara Streisand. She's lovely. I happen to just not look like her.
I know.
Just like, why?
Profoundly insulting. So, have you heard of Barbara Streisand? Have you heard of Michael Jackson? Like, who hasn't? Are you insane? What have I heard of Barbara Streisand? Frickin', have you heard of a pile of crap? Because you look like that.
Yeah, and you're just like, yes. Was there more to that? Like, and that idea of having to unlearn all of that, and especially to make like the record that you did, I'm curious, like, what do you like to do in the studio? Like, what are your favorite things? Like, obviously you write and you play and everything. I'm like, but how did you kind of step more into that? And with whom do you like to collaborate? And like, what was your process of that?
Oh, well, I think like first it was what I do when I'm not in the studio. So I went to like my back catalogue of ideas. I went through the voice notes and like started collecting things. I was like, I've got nothing on, it's bloody lockdown. Let's go through what I've always loved and get those ideas together and like really start looking at them and see how much work they need, or if they're almost there and they just need a little tickle. And yeah, it was like so much about like first getting the early process right. Like I've only really been playing guitar since about 2014. And before that I was a top line writer, and in all situations they were collaborative, they were codependent if anything. And so like that idea of being able to have the option for independence was a really big part of my process. So I didn't have to lean on somebody, but that I could if I wanted to, for the sake of an idea is like more of a keys idea than a guitar idea, then I could be collaborative in that regard. But just to be able to have enough of the genesis, the soul of the heart of an idea come from me, so that, you know, it's always imbued. There's like a continuity, there's like a real like sense of cohesiveness to a record as I try and reconnect the previously put asunder genres, you know. And so that was a really big part of it. And then obviously collaborating with people who understood that process and that mechanism. And even we wrote in all ways, like from bringing an idea that's almost finished to an idea that's just a piece part that I need like it's other sections for, to writing something in the room at the time. All of those three kind of ways that were employed on this record, but it was just important that I just chose writers who I think would connect with me like psychologically, emotionally, about my process and about, I suppose, what I was trying to uncover and like navigate. And so I realized I needed a lot more women writers. So with the first record, there were only old white men writing, and some of like the best old white men in the business, may I add, but still old white men. And there were old white men on this record, and they were great. We love them. But like, they're really great. But they've got some of the tastiest old white men in creation. But like, there are more than old white men in the world.
Yes. I love when like the old white man becomes the token as opposed to the norm. That always makes me happy.
Exactly it. And if you look at the writers on the back of this thing, the old white men are not the mainstay. It's mostly like of the, when we put in the calls, me and Dan will put in the calls to who we're going to call to kind of complete the tripod of writer. It was mostly a woman that we'd call. A lot of the time, Natalie Hemby. I absolutely adore working with that woman. But also Joy Ladakun, Ruby Amanfu, in some cases, songs that I'd already started with a dear friend of mine and massive boss lady, Hannah Vasant. Yeah, and Liz Rose. And yeah, like it was Lady Ageddon, you know? And that's what we wanted. That's like, that was a really big help in the ability to talk about things that might be difficult. Like with Liz Rose, for example, I hadn't met her, but like not having like two white guys in the room that might not be aligned in a number of ways. Like I was like, you know what? I feel like I've had a lot of good writing sessions up to this point. Let's just take a punt. It's almost because I'd had some really great, comfortable writing sessions that I felt as though I could get into the subject of talking about the death of my mother with this woman. And like, and so even though the only thing we had in common that was that we're the same gender, like, but that was something. Because I can then speak on like mother-daughter relationships that she'd definitely be able to call on. And, you know, and there wasn't much of the song to complete necessarily, you know, because I've been playing it out for about 3 years, and it was just like there was some relyricking and some bits that need to be done, and need to be done in a very tender way. And so, yeah, and especially specifically that it was about a woman from Barbados, who'd moved to England. That's like, you're not going to be able to comment on this song unless you get really into it. And so, it meant that like I had to have people in the room that I'd either previously worked with and we'd connected through the process of writing already, or like we were likely to be able to connect. Right. like it forced the hand to get a certain quality of song. You need to be able to talk about certain things. And if everyone's like utterly perplexed and their first instincts are to lean in exactly the wrong direction, and we've all got friends that are like that, or had at least, if we haven't got rid of them yet, who like their very instinct is profoundly Becky, and they don't know how every time they are given like an opportunity to lean in the right way, they'll lean in the wrong way, and they don't know that the program is so entrenched that like just like they'll just spurt something out that is just like, oh no.
And especially when you're in such an emotionally vulnerable space, like to not have to explain yourself, to already have that basis of trust and understanding that you're like, okay, now we can go further, because I was like, oh God,
but to not have to validate yourself as well. Like the number of times I've talked to people and they'll be like, oh, but it's getting better, isn't it? Like about like race or whatever. And I'll be like, is it? And I'll be like, you know, we just narrowly dived a freaking Nazi apocalypse here, mate. Like, okay, so maybe maybe in some ways we're stepping forward, in some ways we're stepping backwards, or I don't know. Is it exactly the same, but just like we've just moved some chess pieces, like we're doing a Rubik's cube or something, and like You haven't solved it at all, but like some colors are in different places.
I was gonna say
Like,
we've moved, but was it forward?
was it for? We've definitely moved. Was it for? Like, you know, like, was some laws have come into place. Like, you know, they've not managed to kind of re-Tulsa anyone yet. Like progress, 100%. Okay, like yeah, it's just like when you're in. We've all had people that are like, oh, it's getting better, and you go, oh, is it though? And instead of going, oh, I don't know, actually I don't have the answer to that question, we need some statistics, they're like, oh, but it is. And the answer is because they need it to be, because they don't want to have to feel guilt.
That's discomfort again. Yeah, that
fragility again comes to the fore, and they're just like, no, it's definitely getting better. No, and and like la la. You know, like that kind of business. And I've obviously like got to the point where I've just decided I'm just not going to placate those kind of people, even if they're like, oh no, I think you're brilliant. I'm like, cool, not enough anymore.
Right, you're like, you can think I'm brilliant from over there, and that's a fine boundary.
Yeah. Or you can just adjust. You don't get to question my reality.
Right.
You don't get to get me to a place which I refuse to go to, where I question my living history. But that was most of my life, was people getting me to question my living history. And so refusing to do that is one of the most radical acts of self-love that you can do, is to not allow people to make you bow and curtsy just because you exist. Oh, hi, I would like to introduce you to your own cognitive bias. Oh, sorry. Okay, cool. Like, you can't apologize with that crap. You've got to go, you just got to be like, it is what it is. I'm not going to go especially hard on you, and I'm not going to especially soft. I'm just going to go at regular speed, because that's the speed I'm choosing to go to at. And you know, if I've even bothered to talk to you about it, it's probably because I like you. If I haven't talked about it, it's because you're about to disappear. I'm not going to kill you from my life.
Yep. There was more vigorous nodding, by the way. I was like, I'm adding in the vigorous nodding has continued.
Yes. The vigorous nodding has continued. I just say this furious typing.
The vigorous nodding. Oh my gosh. And what you said about like giving people a platform and giving people your platform, like, it's very strange that if you had told me about a year ago, so 2 years ago, really, you're going to spend most of your time in your living room. What are you going to do with that time? Well, you're going to talk to strangers on the internet, and then you're going to let other people listen to those conversations. I'd be like, I'm going to do what?
I wouldn't believe that. I'd say you were mad if you'd said that.
Exactly. No. What? And so it's been very much that, though, that I am grateful that for whatever reason, people have decided to listen to me talk to other people. That's marvelous. And I love all of you who are listening for that reason. And that means that then I get to have people like you so that they can listen to you talk. Because I'm like mysteriously this worked.
Teamwork. Maybe that's what we really discovered in this pandemic, was just like teamwork making the dream work, you know?
Yeah.
It's got a phrase, but like, I think we got better at it during the pandemic. Like, definitely in the Black Nashville stakes. I don't know if you've noticed what's happened in Nashville, but we've spotted up.
Yeah.
Whilst everyone was locked away, we're like checking on each other. You all right? This is a kind of harrowing period, and we're just making sure no one's going to jump off a cliff. We good? Oh, cool. Well, keep my details. And, you know, teamwork makes the dream work, you know? And like the Ally song got real, and, you know, the cross-culture freaking high five got real. And that's the kind of Dawn of Aquarius kind of shit that I want my life to look like, to be honest.
Totally. That's the thing, is like, when, you know, throughout time, I speak as though I'm an ancient bog witch. But like throughout time, I sometimes wonder what it's like to like converse with me. I'm like, I'm so sorry. Also, you're welcome. raised always with the idea of like tzedakah and giving back, like making the world better, all of that. And so it was always something that I had done without like centralizing myself, because it was just part of what I did. It's like you always gave away, like you chose which charities you wanted to give to, you chose which causes you wanted to, but like I was never like posting about it or telling other people about it, because that wasn't the point.
That's my style. I'm like, if I'm going to do good, I'm going to do it quietly.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go and publicize exactly the thing that I did. I will talk about not being a douche and trying to like my general process, but I won't go, and here's the thing I can get a medal for. The second you've got your medal, you've benefited. It wasn't about that anymore.
Right.
So
right.
STFU and just do the thing.
It was so baffling because like when all of this started and people started, like you said, like the performative allyship, like I chose to, like, I was talking to several artists that I wanted to interview for the pod, but I also wanted to be considerate of, hey, this is probably a really psychologically stressful time for you. Do you want to talk right now or do you want to talk later? And like 2 people that I wanted to interview that week were like, can we talk later? I was like, yes, that's
like,
why
yes!
I asked. And so
100% why I asked.
Yeah, I was just like, oh my God, I'm so glad that you said you like later. That's why I offered. And so it's like, so I didn't publish for 2 weeks, and then I published an interview with a French artist, and someone came at me being like, why didn't you interview a Black artist? And I was like, because I'm not a jerk. I was watching out for the mental health of my guests. I was like,
they actually wanted time off.
Yes.
Is this the bit that you go, dance, Black person, dance? It's your time now.
Seriously, I was just like, do you understand? Oh my God. I was just like,
and they probably thought that they were being really like helpful. They were like, no, now's the time to showcase Black artists. I'm like, yeah, this week. And then like,
oh my God,
exactly that kind of performativeness that makes people then check out. It's like, no, I actually asked what a person of color wanted. Oh, that is a rare thing in itself. People are so vicariously thinking what we might be offended by. How about talking to a Black person ever? And they go, what would you like?
Literally.
You know what? I need this. Thank you so much for thinking of my humanity. And not that I'm just some like Black Terminator there to perpetually survive regardless of what volume missiles are thrown in my direction.
I didn't want to be like, and now why not both has to be like woke by talking to a Black person while they're distressed because Black people are being killed. I was like, oh my God, no, that's the opposite. That is, oh my God.
The antithesis of what I'm trying to do here.
Yes. I was like, that is such, this is like playing on nightmare mode. And I was just like, well, not
playing on nightmare mode.
Yes,
just like, it was definitely a moment where like, I think like maybe my sarcasm made me less of a target for these calls. I did get them, but I didn't get half as many as some of my maybe slightly more forgiving and understanding friends. They were like, oh, like Ali's nice, let's call her on. I'm like, yeah, you better believe they ain't calling me.
You're like, they're staying away.
I even said to one person once, I'm like, we haven't spoken in 6 months. Are you high? Not now. Like, I want my, like, yeah, learn yourself. Make some authentic Black friends.
Oh my God. Yeah, the most I sent to my friends like was just like, you okay? Do you need some snacks? Can I send you anything? I'm like,
yeah. We sit around the table and like took like trade stories about how weird it was that people were calling. Oh wow. Some people are just like, oh no, that's my friend. That's totally acceptable. And then people like literally never talk to her. Okay, this is weird.
Yeah.
You know, it was really weird.
It's
and
very
like,
strange. That's like someone out of the blue, someone that I hadn't talked to in years, out of nowhere, wished me a happy Hanukkah yesterday and was like, so I've been listening to your podcast. And I was like, cool to know you've been following me on the internet this whole time. For God knows how long. But really weird that the way you brought it up was happy Hanukkah. It's like, happy Hanukkah. I haven't talked to you in 7 years. Are you famous now?
It's like, what? Weird. Isn't the weirdest?
So weird.
It's like no one has like an ability to, you know, like just like watch a situation from above, from like a third party situation and go, this is weird and distasteful.
Yeah, don't do that. That's weird. Like that is not. It's not the way.
It's not the way. Like authentically connect to somebody. Maybe not just after you've discovered something that they've done that might make them famous. Like, yeah. And like, we all lose touch. It's a thing. But then just like consult your mind and think whether you ever had a connection to start with. And then if you did, then go, oh, I've missed you. ... It reminded me, I know, and maybe address the elephant in the room. I know that it might be distasteful to touch base given how much time it is, and the timing might be a little bit gross, but honestly, it ain't about that. So, like, we all know what it looks like. Just address the elephant in the room and try and be a human about it.
Oh my God, the awkward flamingos are back. It's like, did you just encounter horrible racism in public? Are you maybe famous? Maybe that's not like the way that you should contact someone.
Please call 555.
To be a friend.org.
Yeah, well, exactly. I think like it's funny. Some people, I realized I must have transitioned from doormat Yola, given like how comfortable I was just kind of calling BS.
Yeah.
And going, no.
I just imagine like an ancient like AOL away message that was just a reading list. Like, please consult these sources. Just like,
please consult these sources. Well, there were so many sources on the internet at the time. It was like you were drowning in resources. You didn't need to talk to anybody other than just hop on the internet and read. It's like you can read, right? Cool.
Here
but
you
if
go.
You can't read, fair enough. Okay.
Here's some videos.
You can read.
That's distribution of resource. That is one thing that I did notice increase a lot, which made me happy because other spoiler, I also work in the field of therapy, is that over this course of time, as we've been all kind of mushy and weird and at home, like there have been so many resources that have come out. Like I have noticed that like clients of mine at least are like, oh, I discovered this about myself by watching TikTok, or like, oh, wow, this popped up in my YouTube feed, like things like that, where people are coming to new ideas about their identity and also learning new things about our society, because like there actually are resources available now that people are stumbling.
Yeah.
I'm like, yes.
It's fascinating. I think like the George Floyd era was a really, in 2020 was a real, and the consequent like BLM protests were, like it was a really rich vein of like things just flying about your algorithms that might make you less of a douchebag.
Yes.
Like it's really, really useful. And I pointed a lot of people in those directions. I'll be like, and not even most of the time, not specifically, I'll be like, everyone's algorithms are rife right now. Why me? It's literally everywhere. I'm not as like, Google's got everything. Instagram is literally swimming. Like, go have at it. It's
Google.
It's right there. You have a computer in your pocket for the first time in history. Use it. Like, yeah, it was crazy. And like, and amid this time, I'm trying to write an album.
Oh my God, that's why I was just like, I'm so glad you chose people that kept you emotionally safe during that, because I was like, yeah, that's not the time to work with genius old white guys. That's not the right time.
Again, love them, not the time. Like, well, some of the time, and like, I would inadvertently gravitate to the slightly more weird ones.
Oh yeah,
like that at least maybe would allow me that kind of the brand of escapism that I enjoy being a sci-fi lover. And I'd be like, yes, don't give me the normos, give me the oddballs.
I was gonna say, like, I dunk on myself and my partner daily because he is an older white man from Memphis, and every day I'm like, how did this happen? And he's just like, and he's like, why are you like this? I was like, why are you like this? But as long as someone has like the brain spice, like, because he's a fellow creative as well. He's an engineer and producer and whatnot. And like, if someone has like the brain spice to go with you on the journey, that's very exciting, regardless of anything. It's like if someone has that, like that is just it's the magic. And like So if someone can at the very least like be like, hey, this story you're telling me, it's not my story, but I'm invested in it and I'm listening. Like I'm like, great, we're good.
Important. Yeah, you need people in the room to be on board with what's going on. That became like the main mission, and like however they got there, like whether they got there of their own volition or you had to play some elaborate mind game to get them there, like whatever gets them there, by the time they get to the room, they need to be there.
Yeah.
And so that was like the mission for real, was the mission to get people in the room that were on board with the journey. And that's why the record sounds like a journey. Like, you know, like it sounds like I've talked about how the first and the last song are a counterpoint of each other.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
What the last song speaks back to the first song and goes, come on through.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like that's really what it's doing, and it encourages you to cycle the album because you want to then revisit that first person and watch them go through that, and then that person then calls back to someone else, and it continually goes through, calling people through the process. And each song is like a little moment of that process, a little snapshot, not necessarily always like you know, a chronological happening, but you know, stage in the process. You've got, you know, everyone needs their dancing away in tears moment, and like that whole kind of like, bye bitch, like I've seen on the internet recently a lot of like people like, you know, if you ain't about it, peace. Yep. Like there's a lot of this kind of like people using peace out as like you know, the peace emoji. Yep. And so that's kind of really, if you wanted to boil it down to an emoji, like it would be peace out. It's been wild. Peace. You know, like that's really dancing away. It's been wild. Peace. And then just like we out. Like and then looking at the micro of your situation and going, right, okay, this space ain't for me. I'm gonna go and find where I'm supposed to be. And then like obviously then we go into the macro of Diamond Studded Shoes, and it's like, oh my god, the system's literally trying to program my mind to never do anything I want to do. Right. And then we just start ticking off the things that are important to me anyway. Like, you know, we get through freaking Be My Friend, and that's probably the big turning point. We identify what's wrong, and then we're like, do you want to be an ally? And by allyship, I mean, no one's thanking you. There are no medals. It isn't about you. Jog on. No medal will adorn you. Here comes a non-racist. There's no fanfare. I'm sorry, buddy. You're waiting for a big old procession. That's it's a bit of a two-pronged song, because at the same time, it's speaking to the protagonist to be like, also, if you're minimizing yourself, no one's going to thank you for that either. Right. Your maximum effort is going to become the minimum requirement. And so, like, no thanks will come your way. It's the first line. Just to let you know, for both parties, one shouldn't be thanked, and they will henceforth not be. And the other one, like, it was never coming in the first place. So stop doing whatever the hell it is you're doing. And so, like, yeah. And then we just move through this need to connect, and this sense of that life isn't a dress rehearsal, and that mortality is very present, and all of these things, and a great overcoming. And that's, once we get through that, we throw it back to number one. So yeah, like, it's funny because I thought of it when I was doing the track listing, like a play or like a series, like a 12-part series, you know. Like, and so it's funny that like I did that, and then I then like delivered it and then went to shoot a movie.
Yeah, be like, time to channel that into someone else entirely.
Yeah, exactly. No, very much a dovetail of an experience.
Wow. And I'm so curious now. I was like, what are your favorite sci-fi stories that informed you? I was like, I'm just dying to know. The nerd in me is like, I must know.
Oh, well, I think like I love Star Trek. And I really always have, even especially the new Star Trek. You know, there's a new Discovery out at the moment.
Oh.
And it's so good. It's so good. But yeah, my mum was well into Star Trek, and I was in it. I was just grew up with Star Trek as a thing.
Yeah.
And so like that became like just a big part of my life. Like just seeing that on the telly. Star Wars was a big part of my life, seeing that. Being like a real like lover of, you know, I suppose it segued into fantasy as well. And so I had the kind of Potter, Lord of the Rings kind of grounding as well. Yeah, like I feel like when it came to also like my like love of like anime, like Ghost in the Shell and things like that, it was like that kind of crossover of things that kind of pertain to sci-fi, fantasy, and anime hybrids like that. Yeah, there was so much in that kind of that triangle that spoke to me. But yeah, like yeah, I suppose they were the big ones really.
Yeah, and like I love that also you brought anime into it, because I was looking at you use your avatar on Zoom and I was just like, oh my gosh, you are like a space witch, and I love it.
Yeah, it was like, it's supposed to be like you know, Kemetic royalty cross intermarried Nubian house, warrior queen from the freaking African Middle Ages. Like I used to go to so many like every Black History Month, I go to like these wonderful networks that would have like endless lectures on like royalty from sub-Sahara and like and I suppose mid-Sahara and North African houses, and how like just the whole political situation, how it worked, how it the balance of power shifted, and all these kinds of things, and all the houses and how they kind of dealt with their territories. And there were so many lectures I go to that would speak on these queens and like warrior queens. I could never like retain it, so I just like make loads of notes and then read it later. And I was like, they'll be like, okay, so who's this one? This one's warrior queen Gudit or Gudi, who was like, you know, from this part of Africa. And then you'd read another one and it'd be like, okay, so the understanding of like how, you know, Kush and Nubia interacted with each other, and like there was endless like all of this, and then Nzinga, and like all of these names became like an inspiration, and then like built into like the idea of like the outfit I was wearing. So it's actually a still from a little animation done for my cover of Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. And in this particular situation, it's more of like goodbye. The Yellow Brick Road, I suppose, in the original song is just like, you know, that whole, you know, playing for rich people in their penthouses kind of situation, and the big machine. But the machine I'm escaping from is the one of my mind being colonized. And so, yeah, like that's how I kind of connected to and identified the song. And so that kind of plays into like the look of what I'm wearing, and you know, yeah, so that's a still from that.
I love the story there. That sounded like a little kid. I'm just like, tell me more stories. I was like, literally, this podcast could be a gazillion hours long, because these stories are fascinating to me. I'm like,
I sense I have to leave, but no one's told me to yet. Normally, someone goes, "You need to leave. Why haven't you left?"
The time has come. Like it truly is one of the unexpected blessings of this time, that this did become like a major mainstay of my creative and professional life, that I'm like, I get to hear people's stories and share them with other people. Like I don't know how I stumbled into this, but I'm thrilled.
Well, I'm thrilled that you've done it. It's been really great. But I think we're near wrap time, so throw something else at me and then we out.
Oh my gosh. I was just like, there's so many questions in my mind. I guess, what has it been like sharing this personal of a journey with other people? Like, how has it been to get kind of the vibes back?
Well, I suppose like it's obviously cathartic. Like, number one, it's cathartic, obviously. But like, it's a realization of like a moment in time where I've been able to build up enough network to be able to tap it for my own creative means. One of the kind of, like, with the first record I did, I wasn't able to do that. Like I've said, I didn't know anybody. So it was mostly like, you know, tapping up the ledges via the power of Dan's Black Book, you know, and I wasn't able to go to anyone that necessarily could reflect any of the experiences that I've had in life.
Right.
And so, like, it's really validating of the work I've done to build those networks and those connections and those relationships, because like, I love to bounce things off people. I love to feel in the bosom of something, you know, and like, that's how I excel. I excel when I feel this sense of like, I've just have resources around me and and they know how to kind of, I suppose, trade ideas with my particular kind of mind. And so it was like reassuring as well that I wasn't alone. I've been alone a lot of my life and I didn't have to be alone anymore. And like, I spent time like building like a band and actually having time to do that instead of just picking people up randomly.
Yeah.
Like, I was able to actually just build it and actually with intention, to actually intentionally do that.
Yeah.
And to intentionally build my writing networks and then tap them up, and to carry on doing that, just so, like, you know, whichever way I want to write a song, that I am able to do that, to be able to be productive. Like, it's also a security blanket. Like, if you weren't born into a bloody well trust fund, then, you know, you need to know that you can carry on being productive, and that, you know, you can be independent in that no one gets to hold your intellectual property ransom, or your ability to create ransom. You know, you know that you are the person that can take care of yourself as a grown-up woman, you know. Like, so it was a lot of things, you know, like, that make you feel less insecure. As, you know, have you ever had bill anxiety? Do you know what I mean?
Which anxiety?
Bill anxiety, when you don't want to open up your bills because you don't want to have to process.
Yes. The pile of mail that looms and it just sits on the kitchen table taunting you.
Yeah. And even if you then decide to pay it anyway, you just don't open it, because the emotional process you experience through opening it gives you levels of anxiety. Now, this is something that only poor people understand. If you were like, if Papa paid for all of your tuition and then like made sure and gave you a deposit, you don't have a freaking clue what I'm talking about.
Right.
Like, but if you really have been like in a danger situation, you've been like, had the bailiffs coming for you, or like you've been crap, I'm going to get kicked out of here in about 3, 2, 1, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. And like, or just been like hard up and gone, I'm just getting a bit close to the wind right now is what I'm doing. Like, that was it's a real feeling. And to be able to feel as though you can provide for yourself creatively, be it on your own or to have people that can help you get there, that are really willing to and really able to, and bring things out of you so you have a connection to the songs. So it isn't just a bunch of people writing songs for you that you have no emotional connection to, but ones where that you can talk about like ad nauseum, unfortunately. You know, it's just such a valuable feeling. And like, I understand how hard it is to get to, and it's one of the hurdles that we have to jump, like when jousting with our upper class peers, you know, like they don't have to deal with that, but we do, and it's terrifying. And so it's a great relief when you find people who get it and can interact with you, and that never gets old. The more you meet people, the more valuable it is.
Yes. I love that you like found yourself by unlearning a whole bunch, and then you're like, and now I'm going to cast the net. And I was like, and you collected so many beautiful people and songs. I was like, that's so cool.
It's really, really relaxing.
I love that. Oh, you've been so generous with your time as well. I really appreciate that.
Hey, you know, you've been an absolute delight, so it's not been work.
Oh,
thank you again for listening to this episode of Why Not Both. If you liked what you heard, please make sure to like us and subscribe to us on your preferred podcast platform. You can also come hang out with us on social media. We are at WNB the podcast, both on Instagram and on Twitter. This season, we are brought to you by Under the Radar magazine. Under the Radar is a nationally distributed print, music, and entertainment magazine and website. You can find them at www.undertheradarmag.com, and feel free to support them on Patreon. Extra special thanks to our producer, Laura Studeris, who is literally a rock star. Thanks again, and I look forward to seeing you next episode.